Hey, good morning. Happy Thanksgiving. Oh, look at that. There's my other, I wondered where I put that. There we go. So Hannah's story is so special, and part of why we wanted to share that this morning is because this morning what we're going to do is this idea that we stumbled onto. I think this is the third year we've done this, where one of the perspectives that I get from getting to be the person who meets with lots of you and knows lots of you, and not just me but the whole staff, is this realization that the astounding number of amazing people a part of this place is pretty overwhelming. And for me, what I didn't see coming, and maybe this even relates to the whole 10 years later evolving faith conversation, what I didn't plan for when we planted this 10 years ago was the realization that lots of people follow Jesus, and they have their own story with Jesus. And frankly, many people's motivation, the primary point of connection for them in Christ is different. And so, more and more I think what I'm realizing that so much of the role of Sunday, there's times where it's about new information, and there's times where it's about helping people learn something that they've never learned before or heard before. But sometimes what I'm understanding from many of you is sometimes the role of Sunday is just this weekly prompt to be provoked to consider that this mysterious God of the universe who manifests in his son Jesus is indeed good and can be trusted, and that really what you're looking for is just the energy to maybe trust for another week, or trust again having not for decades, or even consider that having never done it before in your life. And so this morning what we're going to do is at each of the services, we're going to do this with different people, but we started this by just saying, why do you follow Jesus? So we're going to have 3 other people join me up here, and just really to provoke a conversation around this idea of what's your point of connection. And my point is, my hope is that this will provoke your own internal conversations. And you should know that we've not rehearsed, we've not talked, we've exchanged emails. And part of my point here is there's not a company answer. That's not what we're going for at all, but just to genuinely hear people's stories of how they connect. So I don't know where you guys are at. Come on out here. There's 3 of you. Hello, the man behind the door. Come on down. You're on The Price is Right. Seriously, you guys, there you go. Come on out, okay? There's nothing challenging about this platform at all. So this one's mine. You can have all of them but this one. So I'll briefly introduce, in case you don't know. This is Gay Eiman here at the very end, and one of the, if I was having a faith crisis or a life crisis, Gay would be on the short list of people that I'd want to meet with, and I mean that legitimately. She's involved in some of the listening conversations and spiritual direction training, and the depth of Gay's soul is astounding, and you've earned it through a lot of life. This is Matthew McCarl. Some of you will know Matthew. He's among that short list of people that you wish wouldn't have left Helena when he graduated high school, but did. Lives in Las Vegas now, is a professional gambler, right? Matthew's a rock star. If you don't know Matthew, graduated. What year did you graduate high school?
2016.
So 26. So you've been gone for a bit now.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So just... a remarkable man that I thought it'd be fun to hear his unique perspective, and especially because for the last 4 years, only mildly influenced by Narrate. And then this is Ginny. Many of you will know Ginny. She's been around here. She went to Ecuador. She's a professional photographer. She has vibrant hair. She's very creative. She sits on the creative team with us and offers a lot of really fun conversation. And also has her own unique experience with Jesus, and as I understand it, different seasons, and really involved in college ministry, and then here you are at Narrate. And so, thank you all of you for being a part of this. And as I already told them, we've not scripted anything. I just want to reassert to you guys that it's important to me that you're genuine and honest, not that you're trying to say what you think you're supposed to say. It doesn't even have to be orthodox. That wouldn't be the point, is to demonstrate that. We would applaud if it was, but then we'd have to decide what that means. So, Gay, why do you follow Jesus? Just go for it.
Well, I was a desperate 21-year-old walking down an Oregon logging road with my 2-year-old on my shoulders, and I looked up at heaven, as I thought it was up there, and begged God to show me if he was real. And a lady picked me up hitchhiking a couple days later and told me about Jesus. I lived with that family in a 17-foot trailer all winter, and read the Bible and believed. And I have all these years. That's what I follow.
So that started, did you say how old were you?
21.
Was church a part of your background growing up?
Church, but not Jesus. We went through the motions, but and we might have prayed at dinners and such. But when we were having problems, Jesus was never, a source that we went to as a family.
Wow. And you were hitchhiking. I've never done that. That sounds terrifying. Is it still something? Is it still something you do just for entertainment?
Well, I got to Oregon, and 2 weeks later, my car broke down. So I lived up in a mining cabin 30 miles from Medford. So,
wow.
I didn't have much choice.
That's gutsy.
Well,
but I would expect that from you.
Remember?
Yeah, there you go. Sure. Matthew, how do you go after that?
Yeah, I think I would have to recognize that I was raised in a Christian family, and there's a tremendous amount of influence there. But I think for me, it was around my junior year of high school, just kind of the word I've used is being captivated by the person of Jesus, and just in a good way captivated, just almost compelled and just drawn over and over to the person of Jesus, and then just over time more convinced of who he is. And I think that's happened through friends and books and podcasts and sermons and bad experiences and good. But I'd say I've just been captivated and then more and more convinced about not necessarily what I've always believed, but convinced about the big things about Jesus.
So unpack that word captivated. What happened your junior year that...
I feel like I had some sort of more growing up experiences, and I don't know, my siblings moved and was more my own person, and then started reading the Gospels more and read a couple formative books, and had some I had a big experience at summer camp that year, which sounds like a very churchy high school thing, but it was very genuine. And just all kind of culminated that year, and then I feel like that's sort of when things kicked off for me. And there have been parts of my faith that I've kind of been I don't know what I think about it, but when it comes to Jesus, it's just been a pretty steady, closer and closer.
Huh. So 2 questions. What were the formative books?
Blue Like Jazz was one of them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it just connected with me a lot. I just felt really, really close to that one. And then I guess it's not, I guess they're books, but the Gospels. So, yeah.
Sure. They count. They're
probably.
They're okay. They're kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
What? And I love that you're calling them the Gospels. So what connected with Blue Like Jazz? Donald Miller's Blue Like Jazz. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is, but you're dating yourself by pointing to that book, by the way.
Yeah.
Turns out you're getting old, Matthew.
I know. I don't know. It was just laying around my house, and so I picked it up. I think you might have gave it to my brother or something, and it was sitting around there.
Huh.
A lot of it was just that he spoke about faith in a way that seemed somewhat orthodox still, and was still pretty much what I knew, but also was willing to ask questions, but couldn't be pinned down of he's a liberal Christian or a really conservative Christian.
Huh.
And not that he's Jesus, but that's a lot of what I see in Jesus is I'm oh, that sounded really liberal, but then the next thing I'm oh, well, that was pretty conservative to say.
Wow.
And so it's just
Just wait a minute, so he's not a Republican or a Democrat? I was just kidding.
Yikes.
Because that was our next topic.
Yeah. I actually have a flight, so I gotta go.
Gay was going to talk long about it. Anyway, just kidding.
Yeah.
What were you alluded to, there's a couple things where you're I'm not so sure. What are those?
As in about my faith?
Just sense, yeah. You said there's been stuff that's come up.
Yeah, I feel just some of the things of do I have to believe that the earth was created in 6 days? I have no problem with believing that or with anybody believing that, but I don't think it's you have to.
Okay.
And I think a lot of times in early high school, I sort of felt if I don't believe those things, I'm kind of not a real Christian. I don't think anybody ever told me that, but I just had that feeling in me of like, oh, I have to believe these. And I didn't ever read the Bible because I would read it and be like, oh, well, I don't know what to do with that.
Okay.
And now that I have like a little bit more of an open hands, I actually do read it and get more from it. So,
wow.
yeah.
How old are you now?
21.
Man, I'm old. Okay. Okay, Ginny, why do you follow Jesus?
I'm not going to tell you how old I am.
I'm not going to guess either, because you lose at that game.
So I grew up in a kind of not a church-going household, but there was a lot of, biblical print. Looking back, we lived by mostly biblical prints. Hang onto that cusp of like being really emotional and just like, hi, puberty. Like I'm so awkward and I'm emotional, and then bam, that hits, and then it's just hot mess for several years after. But I think that was really when I started to think about those bigger questions.
Wow.
And spent a lot of time, because it was just it became very real all of a sudden. Like, where is my dad now? And he died in a very heroic manner, and of course he was a great dad and a hero to all of us to us as kids and to my mom. But I've for many years deeply struggled with this idea of you have to check the box of Jesus as your Lord and Savior in order to pass through those pearly gates. And I don't know where my dad was at in his walk of faith, if he had one at all. And so that's a deep struggle, to face that as an 11-year-old. Is your dad, where is he?
Wow.
So I think that's when I started to really press into those bigger questions. And by the time I had gotten to college, I'd had several encounters with people who had invited me to youth group in high school. I kind of made friends with a couple people who invited me to campus ministry meetings at MSU, and I think I was just still carrying so much of that baggage, and it just got heavier and heavier. It's like a snowball effect. Like the longer you carry it, the heavier it feels. And so I was, my heart had been softened to the idea over time, but I still was just clinging to this, like, if he's a good God, why does he have to why do we have to check that box? And, in order to decide heaven or hell, and that's, again, that was my big hang up, and I would ask those questions, and people really struggled to answer them in a clear way for me, which, now looking back at it, I'm like, well, yeah, they struggled because we all do, and it's not about knowing all the answers. I think people who walk in the deepest faith, experience doubt, and instead of just heartless, blind following, they're asking the questions. The value of the question, like you talked about. They're asking those questions, and they're wrestling and they're dialoguing with God. So, long story short, I ended up in campus ministry. I accepted Jesus in college, and then I kind of just jumped into the deep end of Chi Alpha and becoming a leader there. I met my husband there. He was in leadership there, and we poured a lot of ourselves into that for quite a few years. And then I think that we just kind of, once we were married and once we were done with college, we were just sort of burned out. So and then from there we end up in a sort of a vacuum for a while, and then I think after a while all of those heavy bags start to show up again, and you're living under the weight of the world and the pressure to be perfect, and it just doesn't work without Jesus in your life.
What doesn't work for you?
I was just listening to a podcast about just the pressure to be perfect, and just the drive to reach every goal and to check every box. And I think that Personally, I struggle with putting a lot of pressure on myself, being a perfectionist, not allowing myself to ever fail. And it takes me to a very dark place, I think. Over the years, some of my darkest times have been when I'm facing all of the ways that I'm not living up to the standards of the world, the standards that I think other people have for me, the standards that I have for myself. And, I think that's where Jesus really comes in, is because I truly believe he's the instrument of grace, between that perfect and that broken. There's Jesus in the middle, and he kind of brings us to a place where we can admit we don't have to be perfect. We can be somewhere in between. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong, but Jesus covers it all.
Wow. Are you an Enneagram 1? We should ask Jill. Jill's sitting there going, she's a 1.
Adam, he always wants to know what Enneagram number I am. I have not taken it, and I kind of am resisting it on purpose now. I refuse to
which
be
would
in
also
your box
which would
now.
also qualify you, by the way.
By refusing to be in the box, I'm in the box.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Just the need to be rescued from
I've
perfectionism.
categorized myself.
So, okay, one more question to your story is, how do you reconcile 11-year-old loses her dad to God is good?
I think in that place of utter brokenness and in that place of living under the weight of sin, living under the weight of just sort of why are we here? Why are we suffering? Why are we struggling? I kind of came to this conclusion that in the end, you just have to either believe that God is good or you don't believe he's good. And I decided, yes, I believe he's good. I see evidence all around me of God's goodness. And therefore, I have to believe that I can trust his goodness. It doesn't mean I have any answers. I mean, I still, struggle with those doubts. But I think for me, it landed in a place of, okay, God, I get that I don't get to know all of the answers, and I kind of am glad sometimes that I don't have to know everything, but I trust your plan and your goodness to the degree where I'm willing to let go of having the answers.
Wow. Can you identify at what point of life you were good with that answer?
I think, I kind of inherently understood it at the beginning of my walk with Christ and, when I accepted him in college. But I think that concept has really grown for me over time. I mean, since then I've become a parent, and then it's like, wow, a lot of pressure to know the answers, to know what the crap you're doing, and you don't.
Or just admit that you don't.
Yeah. And so, I think that you really have to lean into that trust and say, I got nothing else, Lord, and I'm just going to keep on trusting. I'm going to lean into what it means to have faith, which is faith by definition. I don't think it cannot exist if you do have all the answers, because when you have iron proof, then where's the sense of I think about what you said. You were describing your friend who her husband was dying of cancer, and she told your kids, you have to allow for mystery in your theology. And I've really clung to that the last year, especially, just really kind of leaned into that idea of I don't think that we can lean into a relationship with God without kind of a almost blind trust to some degree.
Sure. No, that means something, and that also speaks to even why we're doing this and why we've turned that corner, even with like the series video for this last series, of just recognizing that there's so much story out there, and that when we hear other people's stories, that really does something. Your story makes me, and I'm going to put you all on the spot, but you could just not accept it if you want. But it raises this question of what's the role of suffering in our faith journey. You guys, Matthew or Gay, anything that you have on that end? I mean, is your faith different without it? And if so, how?
Yeah, I don't think I haven't had horrific suffering, but I think it makes you face the questions a little more than just like the cerebral, and reading books and listening to podcasts makes you really come face to face with them and decide, like, do I think that God decided to have an 11-year-old girl lose her dad, or do you think he allowed for that? Or, how do you manage that? I think the suffering really makes you face it more, and so I think it's valuable in that way, in that it shapes us more like Christ.
Anything to contribute there, Gay?
Suffering gives us place for life. When we're successful, when we are on top, we don't really know life as it is. And, we can go out and we can look on the streets, or we can look at the news or whatever, and we can see other life, but that's not life as we see it, because we are successful. And for me, suffering has given me the opportunity to take the mask down and to be real, and to let God show me why in the world he thought I was important enough to save. And that's what the role of suffering has given me. Just the opportunity to be thankful, to be who I am.
Which is connected to this idea of how has your faith evolved, and obviously timelines are relative, and so I'm really eager to hear what that looks like, what that feels like for you in terms of, I was just reading, I've been working my way through Lamentations, which is its own weird little journey, and even the realization, like Isaiah, this great prophet, the greatest one of all perhaps, who promises Jerusalem will never fall, and then all of a sudden these people dealing with the fact, like, oh crap, Jerusalem fell, now what, and who is God? For me, of course, it's confirmation bias, but just seeing over and over and over again that even our faith heroes' faith had to evolve. So where have you guys seen that play itself out in your lives? And I'm just...
Well, I'm not the same person as I was that, just was so grateful for God's leading. In some ways I am, but I came into my faith with a lot of need and a lot of guilt. And I think the churches generally will affirm that. That's a good place. That keeps you under our thumb kind of idea. And ultimately, that isn't the Lord. That isn't the Lord's voice or his compassion for us. And so my faith has evolved that I am not an evangelist anymore. I don't feel guilt if I don't say Jesus' name over and over in a conversation. My commitment and what I have evolved to is that the only responsibility I have is to love. And beyond that, God will show me what else there is. But that's my only responsibility right now. And that has really evolved from where I began.
There's obviously a deep well there of churches love to keep you under their thumb from your guilt, and what was your other word? Unpack that. Like what? Because
Well, we've
again,
been
it
in
comes back
enough
to
churches,
Acts.
and we've had enough. God told me to say this, and God told me to do this, and then chaos erupted. For me to understand that God's the final authority and the final one that is true. We're all just humans. We're all going to be humans till we die, But God is ultimately the true source of love and grace and mercy. And so I'm thankful for Narrate because you're so different. And I don't have to, I just don't have to think about some of the things I have in the churches. We've been in the churches a long time. So, I always felt that was obligation to faith.
Sure.
And I think in some ways it is, but not in the same ways I did in the beginning.
I appreciate your feistiness. You're among those who will approach me and go like, yeah, I don't know about that. I like that. I don't like it when most people do it. For some reason, I like it when you do it. So.
I'm shorter.
But we had this conversation, but I just, there's probably been a couple months where you had said, hey, thanks you had a few of us from the staff out and were just thanking us. And what I think ought not be missed is the fact that it's a reciprocal relationship, that when someone like you affirms this place and this community, in a sense, it's a circular statement because you're also affirming yourself, because of who we are is because of who you are and who you are. And like we can do things like, hey, let's go split firewood, not evangelize. We can suggest that. That's only effective to the degree that people buy into it. We can do a series called Help My Faith is Evolving. That's the easy part. It takes quality people who buy in and are a part of that, who make it all doable. So it's why I say that everybody has their own season, but I'm really, really glad that you're training in spiritual direction.
Well, for me, I always felt obligated, and it was part of the routine to tell people about Jesus. Now I feel like when people ask me, how did you make it through? I'll tell them quick, because I'm very proud of, my Lord, but I'm not going to throw it in their face.
Yeah. Huh.
Or do it because I have to meet my standard of being a Christian. I don't have to do that anymore.
That's emboldening. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any order?
Yeah, I would say, I think that, I've had some different stages with faith, and one that I've kind of just come out of is that thinking that nobody told me this, and I wouldn't have said it, but that I have to be in sort of like a Christian leadership role, and that I have to be I never had an evangelism complex where I had to be evangelizing, but that I had to be leading and doing something within when I was in college, I was in Young Life and here with the kids or whatever, and just in different places doing different things, but that almost became our faith, I think, at times. And so the last year-ish has been a good kind of break to see but what does it look like for me actually to follow Jesus? And not that I wasn't during those times. And the communal aspect of it is so good, but what does it look like to be in when it's not my job or not my volunteer? But there was a lot more of I want to make a decision within a couple minutes on if that spiritual experience that somebody said happened was real. Okay. And now it's more that's totally could be real. I don't know. I'm not God. And the same with a lot of theology. Know some of the things that I really hold true to, and some things that I really don't like, some things I really do like, but I'm not going to say that I know it all.
It's refreshing to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are big observations at your season of life.
For sure.
Yeah. Could I just point out that you also have notes, which might also contribute to your profession?
It's almost turned into my Linus blanket up here. I gotta have my
That's funny. Help us. How has your faith evolved?
Gosh, well, how long do we have?
How many notes do you have?
Right? Well, yeah. So I think probably a good place to start would be I resonate, or what Gay said resonates with me about kind of coming from an evangelical background. And, when I became a Christian in college and was part of Chi Alpha and the AG background, that was what I needed at that time, to completely do a lifestyle about faith and kind of submerge myself into a new life. I needed that structure. I needed a lot of things. I had a lot of things to learn about God because I was basically starting from scratch. But I think, the trouble with that is I really struggled with some of the messages and like you said, that pressure of, I like to I like everybody to be happy, and I don't like to rock the boat. So it really stresses me out to think about just going up to somebody and being like, "Have you heard the good news of Jesus?" I just
Yikes.
It just. I mean, I've rehearsed, obviously. But that's just not the way that I want to tell people about Jesus. I want to, by his grace, hopefully have these small moments where I can represent him properly and represent the character of Jesus to somebody through kindness or just love that doesn't have any parameters, just kind of love them in that moment and be empathetic is more my style, I think, in terms of reaching out to people about Jesus and so I think that's why, I went through that season of just, I didn't want to be pushed, but I did want to be encouraged, and kind of in that I stumbled into a weekly Bible study that really brought me back into the Word, and then I kind of started coming to Narrate, and that sort of affirmed, okay, I'm not the only one out there that feels like tract handing out is like so awkward, just
Sure.
it gives me anxiety just to think about, but what doesn't give me anxiety is trying to set an example of the love that God has for his children. And on that note, I think that the biggest probably evolution in my faith that's happened in the last few years has been becoming a parent. Nothing speaks to me. I'm a very visual person, and I think that daily I think, wow, we are like God's perpetual toddlers.
And you don't even have teenagers yet.
I know, yeah. So check back with me on this question in about 10 years.
Jeez.
But when you create a tiny version of yourself and argue with it every day, it really sort of brings into perspective.
That's perfect. You could write a children's book on that line right there.
No,
that's a good line.
To be fair, you see, you're better at citing your sources. I totally stole that from the internet.
Oh, well,
But
that's really good.
I did in the Bible study that I'm part of. I did a study where it was people of the Promised Land, which kind of followed Moses bringing the Israelites out of Egypt and that kind of stuff, and then all of those 40 years that are so just kind of like watching a parent and a toddler, as Israel just continues to fail to listen and continues to push against God or forget about God. It's like, okay, you can collect manna for 6 days, and on the 7th day, you do not collect any manna. And then literally, like, one verse later, he's like, I just said not to touch that. As a parent, I think there's been a lot of revelation about just the fallible human nature we all have inside of us. Toddlers just don't really have an ability to filter that yet, but so much of the behavior that I abhor in my toddler is kind of just human nature, and the ways that we're all selfish and we're all self-focused and we're all struggling with the authority of God and how to navigate a relationship where we love someone so deeply but also hate rules.
Sure, that's fair. To your comment about showing it in a different way, so I've been a part of a few weddings in my life, and usually the photographer is like public enemy number 1, 2, and 3 because they're usually, I don't know, that's usually where the conflict happens between me and the whole experience. But I've done I think I've just done that one wedding with you, the Balls wedding, and you are a remarkable wedding photographer. Like, you're the opposite of all kinds of words that I can't say from the stage, but like the grace that you're alluding to and the representation of Christ in what is such a tense environment, you do a really good job in those environments with all that. So kudos to you for that.
Well, thanks. That's a deep compliment. compliment. I just refer to myself as shouty in a fun way.
Yeah, no, you're fun, and yet you get it done, but that's not easy to do. Okay, so we're running out of time, so you get no more than 30 seconds. But what are the spiritual practices that keep you connected?
I walk and pray.
You walk and pray. Bam. Thank you, Matthew.
No. Wow. That was good. I don't know if I can top that. I would say...
I told you, there's a deep well over there.
Yeah, for real. The Bible, like reflection, some meditation. I think like having some friends that you can confess to and receive their grace and know that it's also received from God.
Wow.
Yeah, I definitely think community is a big one for me, between Bible study and just, being a part of things that Narrate really keeps me sort of grounded in what matters. The other thing I think for me was I always have felt that sort of performance, like I need to pray in a certain way and I need to get down on my knees and I need to be like, my mind is clear, and I've just let go of that a little bit, and I just talk to God in my head now, as opposed to like, okay, from 8:20 to 8:25 is prayer time,
Sure.
I had to let go of that
Wow.
and just be like, you know what, God's listening always, and I can say things to him anytime, and just like any other relationship in your life, where if the person was always present, you could just blurt out what's on your mind, and with no judgment, there's that dialogue back and forth, and I think that's really been helpful for me.
Wow. Thank you, guys. It's really fun. Let me pray. God, thanks that you're a part of 8 billion stories, and that there's intersections and there's uniqueness in all of them. And thanks for this place and these people and these relationships. Thanks for Gay and Matthew and Ginny and their stories and their families. God, we want to be faithful to you. We want to know who you are and what you're like. We want to be faithful to our friends who are asking big questions. And so pray that you'd help us be present enough to be attentive to your leading. Amen.
If you would like to engage further with Narrate Church, you can find contact information online, www.narratechurch.org. We would love to hear from you.